That was well timed, right on the 3-minute mark.
It was very well rehearsed.
He's in the media.
Mr. Blake?
Richard Blake, 5099 West Twin Lakes Drive, Tyler, Texas. Can't promise my timing will be that good. In today's world, we have an intrusive federal government. We have an administration not adhering to the Constitution in many instances. We have an assault on our inalienable rights, especially the Second Amendment. We have an administration willing to sacrifice our sovereignty to the UN in gun control and in the federalization of local law enforcement. As a result, I believe it's our responsibility as citizens to fight for our rights to hold on to our individual sovereignty. When Washington, D.C. or a federal agency wants to get involved with legislation or regulation, I have a litmus test for them. Is it constitutional? Is it part of the enumerated rights that the Constitution grants to the federal government? In my opinion, this document, the answer to that question is no. It's not part of their enumerated powers from the Constitution. The sheriff, as George stated, is responsible for local law enforcement, and I encourage him not to relinquish control of anything to the feds. This document may seem innocuous, but the devil is in the details, and I'll point out a few questions that I have. First of all, the purpose is to investigate firearms trafficking. I would like to know what the definition of firearms trafficking is. Could that be going to a gun show and buying guns? Could that be myself and my neighbor doing a transaction? I don't know, it doesn't define it. It also says their purpose is to gather and report intelligence relating to trafficking. Does that mean that they can plant people outside of gun shows, see who's going in and out? Can they go to swap meets to see if any gun transactions? I mean, what is gun trafficking? There is no definition in this document. Secondly, one of the strategic objectives is to interdict and prevent illegal firearms trafficking. That is not defined here either. I guess more importantly is where the document says that in the case of it gathering any evidence or any surveillance, whether it be wiretapping or whatever, if the federal regulation is less stringent than the local regulation dealing with that gathering of evidence, the federal rules and regulations apply. So again, we are giving control of our local law enforcement over to the federal government. If anybody thinks that the federal government follows the law when they're gathering information about people and their data, they're sadly mistaken. So in conclusion, I would ask that this be postponed until some of these questions can be answered before a decision is made on this subject. Thank you. That's pretty close.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. You're right, that was pretty close to the 3-minute mark. Sheriff or Chief Carlson, do you want to speak to this matter?
Thank you, Judge, Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to clarify, this has been presented to Commissioners Court as a budgetary item only, for us to be able to recoup overtime from the federal government when we work. I'm not here asking for permission to work with FBI, ATF, DEA, Secret Service, Homeland Security. We already do that on a daily basis. I'd like to take you back to just several incidents that I myself were responsible for. First of all, back in 95, when I worked a quadruple homicide as an ATF agent at Katie's Lounge in Kilgore. Sheriff Soriano, before he was sheriff, and I got the confession from DeRoyce Mosley, who was put to death for that. That was working in conjunction with local and federal law enforcement. An offshoot of that case, I prepared an 83-page affidavit after about a year investigation into the drug trafficking and homicides in Longview, Texas. We cleared 3 homicides from that investigation and arrested 54 individuals, mostly gang members from Longview, and put them in the federal penitentiary. 2007, right across the street right here, the downtown fire, what's been referred to as downtown fire. I, as an ATF agent, member of the National Response Team at no cost to the city of Tyler or Smith County, sent people in here from all over the United States, experts, to do that investigation, no cost to the public. Another one, January 1st of 2010, I was also involved in it as a case agent of what's been referred to as the East Texas Church Fire investigation. ATF expended well over $1.5 million by calling 2 national response teams to respond here at no cost to the public of any 3 counties we worked in. And as you know, we have 2 people in the federal penitentiary, our state penitentiary right now. At no time was that case relinquished to the federal government. I was an ATF agent, but I had a counterpart who was the co-case agent, Texas Ranger Brent Davis. I'm not worried about the federal government coming here taking our rights. We work hand in hand, day in and day out with the federal government, and I, as the sheriff, am not going to relinquish any rights to the federal government. This is simply a memorandum of understanding that enables them to pay us overtime when we work with them, and that's pretty much it.
I have a couple of questions, Sheriff. First off, my thing would be these items that you listed here that was done without a memorandum of understanding, so we could still continue on like that. And you said that this was so you could get overtime and stuff, but it says right here in the document that this is not a funding document, and it specifically says that participating agencies will provide for their salaries and employment benefits of the people that are on the team, and only if ATF has funds available do they give anything.
That's a typical federal document.
So I'm just saying, so if you're relying on that funding, it's not spelled out in here.
What that means there is the funding as a salary is not funded in there. I've been told that it will be to refund overtime. We have the similar agreement right now with the FBI and DEA and the U.S. Marshal Service. We get overtime from them. It's the same thing. Only difference is instead of saying FBI or Secret Service, it says ATF. That's the only difference.
And the other thing is, it specifically supervision and control says with the ATF special agent in charge or his or her designee having operational control over all operations in the task force.
I can tell you,
it says ATF. It don't say Sheriff Smith. And here's where I have the problem.
Okay.
I elected you to do that, and I have full faith and confidence in the Sheriff's Department to do that without ATF.
I'm glad to hear I got your vote.
Yeah.
But anyway, the whole thing of the matter, a special agent in charge, my 22 years with ATF, I've never seen him on the scene. That is typical federal language.
I don't like your language.
Well, we can withdraw the offer right now and we continue to accrue compensatory time. It doesn't make any difference. I'm just trying to look for avenues to recoup the money, which we're already doing from FBI and DEA and the U.S. Marshal Service. There's no difference in the memorandums of understanding we have with them and this memorandum of understanding.
Is it possible to clean up some of that language in this agreement?
It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, how much money are we talking about in overtime? I mean,
It depends on how often we work with them. I mean, all this time the ones I just spoke of earlier, there was no overtime paid back. It's some pretty significant investigations. We've had them help us on when Ogar got killed. They spent a lot of time. They went to Arkansas with us, along with FBI. We work day in and day out with them every day. And as far as relinquishing control to them, I think the judge can tell you, I, as a local law enforcement agent, cannot go to the United States Attorney's Office and file a federal case, nor can they come to the state court. What that's referring to is federal investigations only. When we have a federal investigation, you're going to have a mixture of people in there that don't rise to the level of federal offense. Those are going to be weeded out and prosecuted in state court. In that case, we have a federal case agent and a local case agent.
Judge, I'd like to hear from Mrs. Smith. Is this a standard MOU as far as this particular thing is concerned with ATF? I mean, I've seen several with FBI and everybody else, and it never has been a problem before.
Yes, ma'am. As I've looked through this is basically a memorandum understanding between the two parties. There isn't anything as far as the outlay of overtime. that we don't already have through the equitable sharing program, which is what this leverage is upon. And that's an agreement that I think the sheriff, we've had for years.
Yeah, equitable sharing program, we don't use our equitable sharing program, federal or state, to reimburse overtime or anything. I think the only one that does that for salaries, as far as I know, is the district attorney's office. We don't use that for that. This is totally and separate from that. The only time you'd have equitable sharing would be if we go out and work in a case together and we divide the proceeds of equitable sharing. This is, there's many times that we work investigations, just as on the church fire investigation. There were no assets seized, but there was overtime expended. So they have a funding mechanism by which they can pay overtime.
And that's what this MOU leverages upon.
Well, it sure does not spell any of that out. Matter of fact, it says specifically opposite of that when it talking about being a non-funding document and all those kind of things. I mean, if we're doing it for that, there ought to be, and that's not the real concern here with me. My concern, absolutely, if they would strike this with ATF having control over all operation. I know you spelled out, well, this federal, whatever. It don't say that. It says all operations related to the task force. And I elected you to do that.
And that's not where it's going, Commissioner.
And, well, I mean, I don't trust the federal government, Sheriff. That's the bottom line. And I mean, I'm like somebody.
Well, I trust but verify.
Yeah. And,
Well, and
and I have full faith in you. You used to work for them. You do a great job. And
What people fail, people look at me as a former ATF agent. If people that really know me remember back in I can't remember that far back anymore, 1976 to 1987, I was a local law enforcement officer that went to the federal government and came back. I haven't changed one bit.
And I know I like you, and I want you to
stay. The federal
doing
government
what you're doing.
is not down here in Tyler, Texas. It's in Washington, D.C.
Well,
I just feel like my concern is twofold. Very few things frighten me. The federal government's power and the overreach of their power really does frighten me in a really core place. I think I have a good grasp of what the roles are of government, and we're so far outside of those now that it's hard. I don't want to be responsible for cracking that door anymore. I'd rather us have to go back. I'm speaking to the Lions Club in a couple of hours about budget issues and tell them we've got to have more money. We can't get our job done here because I've seen under the little investigations we were involved in this year, FBI and local attorney general spend unlimited amounts of money in time and hassle and stress involved in something that were really nothing. Quite honestly, involving most of us, I guess nothing. And I know I can't even imagine if the FBI or ATF came knocking on your door, what you would spend to try to get yourself back to whole. And that's what concerns me. It's not the sheriff's department. I think most citizens of Smith County certainly have a great deal of respect and loyalty to their local law enforcement, but I do feel like the majority of the citizens I represent have very little faith in the federal government.
Well, I'll leave it in your hands. It's up to you what you want to do. Like I say, all I'm asking for is the budgetary part of it. The rest of it, I already have the authority to do that. We're going to continue working with our state, local, federal counterparts.
Well,
that's not going to change.
It's just something we could.
But if we're going to go ahead and not accept the one for ATF, we might as well pull the one for FBI.
I haven't seen the one that
I remember doing that.
I haven't seen an FBI document.
But I think if we're going to do that, we need to look at compensating our employees.
Well, I don't have any problem with that because honestly, in 7 years I've been here, I don't ever remember voting on an agreement with FBI, or else I'd have the same concerns about that.
Sheriff, is there a time sensitivity matter about having this done today?
There's not a time sensitive whatsoever, Judge. We've been working with them for nothing anyway. We'll continue. I mean, we're going to work on the same investigations together regardless. We're going to continue to do that regardless of what happens on this document. So it's not time sensitive.
What I hear is a number of concerns expressed by the commissioners. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I mean, there's legitimate arguments made on both sides. I would like to just marinate on or look at it over a week, and then maybe come back next week
And I just kind of like for Philip to take another look at it and maybe go talk with ATF and see if you can make the changes that are necessary in the MOU. If you can't, then that's fine.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Sounds like
make more sense than anything else.
Sounds like the court would like to table this item until next week. Is there a motion to table this item number 9 until next week's meeting?
That would be my motion, Judge.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to table item number 9 until next week's meeting. Any discussion on that? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion to table number 9 is passed unanimously. Thank you,
Thanks,
Sheriff.
Judge, Commissioner.
And let me